Mr. Randy Torres with us today. Probably the most famous person in Siloam, at least that I'm aware of. But Randy, great to have you today.
Well, thank you, Max. It's a delight to be here today and get to share this important time with you and with the listeners of these podcasts. I know a lot of people have gotten a lot of value out of it, and to be a part of that really means a great deal to me.
I appreciate you saying that. So all 10,000 or 100 listeners, whichever one you are, we do appreciate it. And so, we'll just hop right in. We're fortunate or unfortunate to be without Luke today. So he's got better things to do, but super excited to have you here, Randy. And so, Randy, if you don't mind just kind of giving our listeners just an overview, your personal story and just kind of from A to Z or as far as you want to go.
Sure, you bet. Well, I'll tell you, I'm a product of the state of Texas, and I consider myself here in Arkansas as a foreign missionary of sorts. But I was born in Austin, Texas, and then raised 60 miles south of Austin in a rural community, much like Siloam Springs, Arkansas, where I live now, where predominantly you have cattle, poultry and oil, and that's kind of the main staples of the economy there. Grew up on my grandfather's farm. We raised broilers, and cattle. I had a cow-calf operation and so forth. Was very grateful to have a rural setting to grow up in. That being said, I was, kind of in a lane of development over time that was somewhat kind of stagnated in a rural community like that. And I recognized the fact that if I wanted to do anything different, I'd need to get an education. I was told by school counselors and so forth that I wasn't college material or anything like that, and to consider the farm, my place to be for the rest of my life. And, that wasn't so bad, but realizing the fact that I wanted to do more things, I recognized the fact that I needed to get moving in a different direction. And I think what helped me propel towards that vision for myself was, growing up in poverty. Grew up without electricity from time to time. Grew up with a disconnected phone during my high school years. And struggling like that made me realize that, this is not how I want to live. So fortunately, my grandfather, spent a lot of time with me out on the farm and taught me really my work ethic. And also taught me how to drive. And one day, as we were driving from ranch to ranch, checking cattle, I was probably in one of the darkest times of my life and desperate times in my life. And I was, I think, 11 years old. And as we're driving along the gravel road, I asked my grandpa, I said, Grandpa, why is life so different for me than it is for you? Because he was very successful and did very well in his life. And he said, well, son, it's because I live by principles. And I'd never really even heard, I don't think, the term principles. And he says, I'll share those with you. And boy, I tell you what, I was like a dried sponge, ready for anything he could share with me. And he said, there's three things I want you to hear, and I don't want you to ever forget them. And so the first principle he shared with me was, he said, thank the good Lord for everything and never feel like it was you that did anything to deserve it. So he understood grace, okay? That's the first one. The second one he said was, don't ever lose respect for your spouse or for yourself. He says, once you've lost that, you've lost everything. So respect was his second principle. And then the third was simply this. He said, Randy, he says, when you get $1 in your hand, he says, you only have two choices. He says, you can either spend it on an alligator, and an alligator will eat and eat and eat and never give you anything in return. He said, in fact, it'll end up biting the hand that's feeding it, He says, or you can take that $1 and you can invest it into a milk cow. And he said, a milk cow will milk for you while you sleep, and she'll reproduce herself for you. And so he said, don't ever buy an alligator unless you have enough milk cows to pay for them. So that was really more of a matter of stewardship, was his third principle. And so those were three principles that I recognized and thought, you know what, I'm going to apply these to my life. And right after that, I ended up meeting my wife, got married, started a business right before I graduated from Texas A&M with an animal science degree. Of course, I majored in animal science because I thought the only thing you could be in life and be successful was a veterinarian,
Well, you've been hearing about milk cows and alligators, so it only makes sense, right?
That's exactly right. But before, thinking that I would get out of school, and I was the first one in my family to ever go and get a college degree, I thought, I would get this good corporate job somewhere, and leverage my knowledge. And what I ended up doing was picking up trash. I got an opportunity to clean up a property, a high-end condominium right across from the sorority houses, and they paid me X dollars a month. And I took that opportunity and I stewarded it to its nth degree, so to speak. And it wasn't long before they started giving me another property, and then it went to the commercial side. And before we knew it, Molly and I had this business that was on our lap that was the second largest service company in the community of Bryan College Station, Texas.
Wow.
Yeah. And so taking that opportunity to earn more money than I'd ever thought we could ever earn, we invested it all into rental properties. And over time, met with a banker friend of mine with Wells Fargo, Dave Stewart, a really good friend of mine. I'd go see him, and he'd go through my financials with me every quarter. He'd pray with me and give me guidance on, taxable events, and I learned a ton from him. And at the age of 31, Max, I was completely financially free. I owned my home. I owned all of our rental properties were paid off, our cars, everything was paid off. And so it was really valuable that my grandfather would take the time to share principles with me that I could adopt and leverage so early in my life.
Well, Randy, it's obviously served you very well, throughout your life and into your career paths.
Yeah.
And so, obviously you moved up here to Northwest Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of take us through what the move looked like and how you got up here to, as you say, what'd you say, a foreigner?
Foreign missionary.
Foreign missionary.
Yes.
To become a foreign missionary.
That's exactly right. Well, what brought me to Northwest Arkansas was the idea that I could come to John Brown University, which was where my wife went to school. And they'd sent a postcard that I got that talked about this new graduate program in ministry. And I'd gotten involved in a little Baptist church in Bryan, Texas, and really started to enjoy ministry. And I thought, wow, that would be a really unique, fun thing to be able to do. And I sensed the fact that, I'm financially free. I've got rental income coming in. Why not? This is something that I could consider doing. So we did. We sold our home and bought more rental properties and moved to Siloam Springs and started graduate studies in ministry at John Brown University. And, and so then eventually worked for Fellowship Bible Church of Northwest Arkansas as a community pastor in our community. And I really thought, Max, that ministry was my future. Then, of course, worked in higher education there at JBU, did graduate admissions and so forth, which has helped me really a lot with understanding people's needs, and being able to guide them, into a career field and so forth. And so I think a lot of those elements kind of came to. And finally, I kind of came to a point where I knew I needed to do something different. I felt like, I felt like a licensed barber in Siloam Springs, and everybody was bald, you know. You got 61 churches there, and your level of impact just wasn't what I thought, you know. And so I exhausted the ministry opportunities in my mind, and I felt like, the Lord just said, I don't need you looking in the rearview mirror. And the only option on the table, Max, was going into banking. I had a local bank that was pursuing me and trying to convince me that banking was something I needed to consider doing. And when all the other options kind of went off the table and the only thing on the table was banking, I thought, why would I want to do that, And then I really realized by the question that kind of came to my heart was, Randy, why are you where you are so early in life? And I thought, well, beyond grace, which of course, it's the first principle I learned from my grandfather. It had a lot to do with a banker that was put in my life, Dave Stewart. And I said, well, my banker, that's why I'm where I am financially so early in life. And then the question kind of came to my heart. It was like, well, why wouldn't you want to be that for others? And I thought, oh, okay. And so, in all honesty, Max, it was like all those years of not just running my own business, but being banked really helped me understand how to be a banker.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So it clicked for you, right?
It did.
So you've stepped into this banking career, and obviously we, you and I know each other from that field and
Right.
work together. And so, what do you think? As far as your banking career, how has it both impacted, your community and yourself and your family as you have kind of developed in this career? I know you took a few different stops, at different points in between, but how has it been a career that has been fulfilling to you to this point as well?
Right. Yeah. Well, for me, Max, it all boils down to relationships. I think banking was, there's the numbers, the people behind the numbers is what I really have a passion for. Not just understanding your customers, but understanding your community and being able to get involved one-on-one with customers and even in the larger context of the community by serving the community, conducting cookouts, for fundraisers in the community, hosting events on our farm, for nonprofit organizations to try to meet the funding needs and the vision to fund their visions, all of those things, including doing a hospital visit, for a customer. That's not expected like I was when I was a pastor, but, your banker shows up to the hospital room and is there, to check on you and pray with you. That element of that really helped me understand that ministry in the workplace was something that I was never really thought much about, but really helped kind of solidify my decision to be in banking.
And you mentioned the hosting events out at the barn, at your place. I'd like to make a note that you do host an annual football game that just happens to happen and have the same result every year, the A&M Arkansas game. I'm sure you had a great time watching it this year.
I did. As an Aggie, it's been challenging over the years to get more Razorbacks to show up anymore, but we've had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's been a blast. It's not fun if everybody's on the same side of the ball.
You're right.
So rivalry can make it a whole lot more fun.
That's right. Do you guys split the audience? Do you make sure that there's a line and Razorbacks on one side and Aggies on the other, or do people commingle?
People can commingle if there's food.
Understood.
But apart from the food table, they tend to flock into their own colors. Birds of the feather flock together.
Understood. Food and drink really help bring everybody together. I totally understand that.
It does.
So, well, that's great. So one neat thing, as we kind of look, from where you've been to where you are as to potentially where you're going. You are running for office for a state representative position in the great state of Arkansas, right?
Exactly.
So that's new on the horizon for you. And do you mind just kind of walking us through, hey, why is this something that you're pursuing?
Sure, you bet. Max, I've had an interest in potentially pursuing an office in local or state government, primarily state government, quite honestly, because I've never lived in the city limits of a community. I've always lived outside the city limits. But, having a family, having, kids in college and so forth, the timing for me was never ideal. And the other factor was that we always had really great state representatives, so there wasn't a reason to even give it consideration. And then recently, I wasn't even aware of the fact that our state representative was not going to run for reelection. And I got a phone call one afternoon at the bank, and this was a considerable influential community leader that gave me a call and asked me if I was aware of the fact that our state representative wasn't running for reelection. And I said, no, I did know that. And this individual says, well, I'm calling you to ask you to consider running. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I've got a full-time job, I've got a bank team, I'm involved in the community, I'm on like 5 boards, I don't know that
how do I have time for this?
Exactly. I thought, I'm not sure I have the margin for it. But I said, thank you for the call, and I'll give it some consideration, Well, then a week later, I get another phone call, and this is, a state representative, and they reached out and basically the same thing. And I thought, well, this is becoming a little odd. Then after the 4th phone call, and it's someone in the legislature, and they said, look, we typically talk people out of running. We try to convince them that this isn't something that they should do. What do I need to do or say to get you to run? And I thought, okay. I said, Lord, I've never, ever had to go hunt for something to do. You've always brought it and laid it on my lap. And is this an assignment that you want me to consider? And when I started thinking about all of the obstacles, that I'd have, all the walls I'd have to get over,
Sure.
I thought, it'll probably play its way out, and it'll be very evident that this is probably not something I should consider doing. But as I started going through the process, it seems like, Max, the Red Sea just parted and continued to part, and every mile marker was a green light. And it's been that way up until this very moment. And so nothing but confirmation and affirmation that this is something that I should consider doing. And it really boils down to the values that my grandfather shared with me and stewardship. As you said, banking isn't the only thing that I've done. I've done a number of things that uniquely position me to understand and relate to most everyone in my community. Having rental properties, being in higher education, experience around owning my own business, running a cow-calf operation, being in banking, being a pastor, running HR for a consumer packaged good company. I mean, it's just ironic that I've got all of these variations of experiences that all have occurred within the city limits of my community all these years, for 22 years. And in being involved with a lot of the nonprofit organizations in the community and having a lot of the relationships already established, I thought, you know what, this may be an investment that I need to consider doing.
So obviously, Siloam has been your home now for over a decade, right? 2
decades.
2 decades.
Yeah.
So 2 decades. So you're very well cemented in your community. So what would you kind of say, makes Siloam, not just your home, but such a great community? Especially for those who live on this 49 corridor, who may have to find themselves going a little bit outside of the way to go to Siloam. Although it feels like as the years go by, that the 412 corridor keeps getting smaller and smaller as we go west and Siloam kind of comes east here. So what would you say about Siloam as a whole there?
Yeah. I think Siloam Springs has been able to maintain that small town feeling that I think a lot of people appreciate, or most people appreciate, I think. And I think one of the unique characteristics of that community is the camaraderie that everyone feels about protecting, defending, and investing into the quality of life that we've had there for so many years. And even if you're in the same industry, you know, your vision of making Siloam Springs, you know, one of the best small town communities in the state of Arkansas, you know, everybody's going to band together and work together for the common good of all. And that's very unique, I think, in our community, is that we partner together, we take care of each other, and I think that's a unique characteristic of our community. We're a very principles-based community as well, I would say. We held the world record of so many churches or per capita, you know.
Yeah.
So I consider our community the Bible buckle of the nation, probably.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's a lot of value that comes from a community that embraces the principles and values that have created what we've had and enjoyed for so long.
Lots of great places to eat too.
Yeah,
well, that helps.
That's right.
Right?
It does help.
It does. It's a big attraction.
Again, if it can bring Aggies and Razorbacks together, you know, it's always a plus.
That's right. That's right. It may take some doing to continue that trend. So, you know, as far as impact, impacting not just your community, but the industry, the banking industry as a whole. What are some of the things, as if, you know, you're fortunate to be elected, are things that you feel like you can do to make an impact on those two specific variables there?
Yeah. You know, Max, as one of the things that I've learned over the years to be an effective person, individual, and banker is to be a good listener. Hearing people out, making sure you understand what their passion is, what their concerns are, how do you help them get from A to Z. You know, you've got to be able to do that. You solve problems, you know, with people. So I'm looking forward to learning more about what are some of the things, for example, one of the police departments that I met with gave me a couple of examples of some laws that have really never been updated over the years, and it restricts funding and appropriations for certain things that they really need. But because of laws that were passed in the 60s and have never been updated, it's handcuffed, quite honestly, their efforts to support a certain area of their police department. So I think things like that, whether it's with you know, municipal government, whether it's with farming and ranching, legislation that might impact, you know, property owners, you know, landlords, real estate management companies, you know, how do we get under the hood under some of this legislation that is, you know, no longer relevant, needs to be updated, and helps our business community foster the continued development and growth that we need to employ people and to provide jobs. And, you know, if the businesses prosper, the people prosper. And so I think being a part of that and understanding, being on the front line of the banking community in our state and being able to bring relevant discussion and collaboration to the table and to Little Rock, I think is something that's going to have some impact that I'm really, really looking forward to being a part of.
So are you out knocking on doors?
Not just yet,
Okay.
but I am looking for some tennis shoes.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, I'm sure we can figure out that part and get you hooked up with a nice pair of tennis shoes to get you out about and walking.
Maybe some red ones.
There you go. Some red ones with some G's on them.
That's
there
right.
You go. There you go.